So on the screen here, we just have the general logistics of the Zoom meeting that we went over time and time again. And so I'll just note here that we have plenty of time for public comment at these meetings. And this meeting here is specifically a meeting of the West Turlock Subbasin GSA's Technical Advisory Committee. Of course, that means others are certainly welcome to be on the call, but those conducting the business are those that are part of the committee of that GSA. So a little bit different today. We're recording the meeting because we're going to put it on for record keeping purposes on the Turlock Groundwater YouTube channel later on. And if there are, I'm not aware of thus far, but I'll make sure any meeting materials that get presented get tossed onto the website as well as soon as we get done with this meeting. And that is it for me, though. But now, Michael, hopefully you filled up your coffee or water after that last meeting, and now it's all yours.
Thank you, Herb. Thank you, everybody. So this is, it's been a while since we've done this, but this is a special meeting of just the West Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency Technical Advisory Committee. And I'm just clicking through names here. Obviously, there's a number of us from TID. We have Karen from Ceres, Orlando from the city of Turlock, Miguel from Modesto, Leandro from Delhi, Mike Pickhock from Waterford, and Christy from Stan County. So with that, I see a quorum of 7 people, unless I've missed something. Jennifer, hearing nothing. So I call the meeting to order at 2:03 p.m. Our first item of business is public participation. This is the time set aside for members of the public to directly address the Technical Advisory Committee on any item of interest to the public that is within our subject matter jurisdiction. You can speak now or wait for an item on the agenda. So with that, is there any comments from members of the public? Just general comments. I'm not hearing anything. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So with that, I'll move to item number 4, Groundwater Sustainability Plan Implementation Schedule. There's an informational update from Debbie Montalbano regarding the schedule and activities for the GSP. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Michael. Herb, I did put a quick little presentation together, and I don't think I shared it with you yet. So I will send it to you. But can I share screen?
Yeah, you have availability to do that now. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Okay, does that?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. So what I wanted to do is walk everyone through kind of what we've been working on to kind of do some planning for the implementation of the GSP as we move forward. And so I wanted to remind everyone that the GSP includes a schedule of implementation support activities and projects that are to be implemented, but those projects are really being implemented and budgeted by individual agencies. And so the work that I've been working on is to and others have been working on behind the scenes is to kind of take the GSP schedule for implementation support activities and then prepare a draft 5-year budget and kind of planning out over the next 5 years what we need to do. And then as we move forward, it'll adjust a little bit, but it kind of gives us a point to move towards, and it allows us to begin planning processes. So we've also been coordinating that with the East Turlock GSA staff as well, because many of these projects are joint projects for the whole subbasin. And so we wanted to be planning and moving forward with budgeting and that sort of thing, so that everybody's kind of in step. And so so I wanted to take the time today to kind of walk you through what we've been doing. And so this is the schedule and the different individual implementation support activities that are included in the GSP. And then this follows through with what we have on the budget. So let's talk a little bit about some of these and what projects are joint projects and which ones aren't. The implementation support activity 1 includes monitoring, reporting, and outreach. We have the annual report. We'll have to budget for that each year. It's a joint project. There's monitoring, data collection, and reporting, and that's done at least semi-annually. And each of the GSAs budgets for those separately. And we have communication and outreach that will begin developing here shortly. ISA 2 addresses data gaps and improving the monitoring network. We've installed recently, back in December, 7 additional wells, 2 multi-completion wells, so that's 4, and then additional 3 over on the east side of the Subbasin. And then last year, we identified an initial suite of wells that were needed, and some of those were jointly funded as well. West Turlock would be installing 2 multi-completion wells, and then 1 additional monitoring well over in the Houston area. And then there's 8 wells along the rivers. We budgeted for half of that last year and planned to budget for another half of that this year. But I think as Michael Clipper will show you later, I think we've divided that up into 2 years now. East Turlock did not budget for their share of the river wells yet. They plan on doing it in the next 2 years, I believe. And we're going to endeavor to incorporate the installation of those wells into a grant application later this year. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But there's more wells that are needed. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So this shows you the monitoring network that we have for the Subbasin. West Turlock is over in this area. You've got, as you know, we've got an upper and lower aquifer over in this area here, divided by the cork and clay that is indicated with the red line. And then you've got the eastern principal aquifer over in this area. And so within the West Turlock Subbasin GSA, which is kind of this line here in black, we are within all of the different aquifers within the Subbasin. And so there's different monitoring networks to monitor each individual aquifer. You can see that the blue dots are the upper aquifer, and the purple dots, and some are blue and purple because they're multi-completion wells. The purple dots are the lower aquifer, and then the yellow dots are the eastern principal aquifer. And we identified, as we were developing the monitoring network, that there were some gaps for the lower principal aquifer. You can see there aren't a lot of purple wells. And then there's gaps over in this northeastern triangle of the West Turlock GSA where there aren't a lot of yellow dots. So there aren't a lot of wells monitoring the eastern principal aquifer in this area. And then we need some additional wells along the rivers because we need to evaluate the interaction between the Subbasin and the surface water. So some wells had been budgeted, like I mentioned earlier, but there's more needed. In addition, the annual report as we developed that, the analysis re-emphasized the need for improvements. There's the modeling that we did suggested that there's been increased movement between subbasins and then the subbasin and the river. And so, that kind of re-emphasized the importance of improving our monitoring network. Also, there's, let's see, oops. I'm trying to, there we go. Also, while we were doing our first monitoring event for the GSP, which was in March, we had some difficulties getting data from a few of the wells. And the reason for that is because the monitoring network that we have right now is focused on utilizing production wells. So you have to bring those production wells offline and have them not pumping for a period of time to obtain a static water level. And because of the extremely dry conditions at the beginning of this year, it was difficult, impossible to be able to do that for some of the wells. And then one well was dry, so we need to look into that. And so what you can see is I put an X over the wells that we weren't able to get a measurement for this first event, and it makes it clear that we're recommending that the GSA consider putting in additional wells that are monitoring wells only and not production wells, so that they aren't constrained by these types of issues. Historically, the monitoring wells, using production wells were fine because it wasn't as mandatory of a program as it is today. So I've got some recommendations on additional wells to be installed. And so let's talk a little bit about that. For the interconnected surface water, there are 8 additional wells being proposed. Those are the wells that were already identified in the work that we did last year. So we're going to move forward with, because they already budgeted as well, although we're going to try to seek grant funding to install them. So the idea is to site the wells and do preliminary design work with the budgeted dollars and then seek grant funding to install them. We'll need the budgeted dollars to pay for the work if we do get the grant funding, because we'll have to pay for the work in advance and then be reimbursed. So we'll need that funding anyway, regardless. But if we are successful in obtaining grant funding, then perhaps we could use those dollars that we budgeted to install additional wells. So we'll look at that. But as you can see, these the colored wells are the wells along the rivers now. We'd be looking at 3 additional wells on the Tuolumne, 3 additional wells on the Merced, and 2 on the San Joaquin. If we're able to find additional wells that aren't being used for other purposes and could be used for monitoring wells, say in the Hickman area or within the communities along the river, then we might be able to move some of those wells as well. And so that's the work ahead in the coming months. The Eastern Principal Aquifer, I talked a little bit about already. The idea is 1 additional well is already budgeted. We're going to be looking at whether or not there are other existing wells in the communities of maybe Hickman and Houston and Denair, to see if there may be additional wells in those areas. And if not, we'd like to install at least 1 or 2 additional wells there as well.
Debbie,
Yes.
have you vetted this like with Valley Water Collaborative to see if there are some entities that have monitoring wells for regional board compliance that we might be able to utilize some of their wells?
Not yet, but that's the idea, is to look around and see what existing monitoring wells may be available. We just didn't have the time as we're developing the GSP to do that. And so that's what we're hoping to do now. But I've tried to put money into the budget in case we aren't able to do that.
Yeah, because I know there are a lot of regulated entities, dairies and other entities that hopefully can save us some money and not to go out and spend money on it. So understood that you needed to budget, but that Valley Water Collaborative is where they're all together, all the regulated entities.
I'll reach out to them. And like I said, I also wanted to reach out to the communities because they may have existing monitoring wells that might meet the need. It also depends on how they were designed and what what they're monitoring. It may not be monitoring the same types of things that we're wishing to monitor for. And so we are planning on doing just that, though. Thank you. That's a great idea. Okay. And then lastly, we're looking at installing additional multi-completion wells. There were 2 already budgeted. We're going to look at perhaps 4 or 5 more. So this gives you an idea of the lower aquifer monitoring wells. Those were those purple wells that I showed you in that first slide. And so I would recommend installing at least 4 additional. So that would be 6, if not maybe 1 more. They could be located in areas where it might actually help the municipalities as well as they're doing their monitoring. There's a couple of wells over in this area that we weren't able to monitor. And so having multi-completion wells would monitor both the upper and the lower aquifer in the same location, which is better to understand what's actually happening between the 2 aquifers as well. And then over in this area is an area where the modeling in the annual report, it showed that that there may be movement between the Turlock Subbasin and the Delta Mendota Subbasin, and water moving over into the Delta Mendota Subbasin below the river. So it may be helpful to have a paired well over here as well. It could help monitor the upper aquifer well, could help monitor what's happening at the river interchange, and then also looking below the Corcoran clay as well. So that's why the idea of installing some paired wells over in this area might be helpful also in knowing what's happening both above and below the Corcoran clay. So those wells and those concepts are proposed in the budget that you'll see, and the 5-year budget that we kind of sent out to the tax to take a look at. So that's what I had on the data gaps. The rest relate to the other ISAs. We're also developing an accounting framework. It's a joint project, and we'll be doing that over the next couple of years. There is some work on the model that will be needed, and I'll talk about that a little later. We're also implementing the projects and management actions, including an adaptive management approach. It has several projects. One is the PEIR, and that's a joint project that is funded by in a draft anyway by the Prop 68 grant that we're working on now. But the final PEIR will need to be funded by the GSAs. And so that's included in the budget. There's a domestic well mitigation program to be developed jointly by the two GSAs over the first couple of years. So that's in the budget. Demand reduction and management programs. That's really an East Turlock GSA item at this time. And then there's extraction or ET reporting. And so that's getting at water use. So East Turlock is funding, I believe they're going to hire Formation Environmental to prepare some estimates on water extraction. That information will be used to do the annual reporting and the modeling within the Subbasin. TID is funding something similar through Land IQ. This year, it's a new approach to doing that analysis, recognizing that there will be two separate approaches within the Subbasin that will need to be brought together with our annual reporting. So there isn't anything in the budget for that item. It's being funded in different ways. There's ISA 5, which is to develop an action plan for exceedances of MTs, which may result in undesirable results. We're to develop a plan for how to do that. And it's a joint project, so you'll see something in the budget for that. There's some additional groundwater modeling in the budget. There's annual updates to prepare and develop our annual reporting. So that's jointly funded. And then there's model refinements that are needed, which would also be joint projects. For a variety of things, including the accounting work that we talked about, there were also some outstanding items identified when we were preparing the annual report. One item was differences in land use between current data sets and historic data sets, and we need to kind of work through that and perhaps update it. And then lastly, in years 3 and 4, we'll be perhaps looking at improvements to the model to support the GSP update that will be required in 5 years. ISC 7 deals with developing the data management system. Our current system meets Sigma requirements. And so this is really looking at identifying if there's additional needs the GSAs have. The GSP includes this over a 2-year timeline. We do have some funding in the budget to look into this. But it may be something that we scope this year and then consider in future years, depending on what the need is. Many other GSAs have been looking at providing additional data and information to on their websites and what have you, so that people have information on water levels and other things. And each GSA has implemented it in different ways. And so the idea here is to look into what we may want and need to do moving forward, and then providing some recommendations. ISA number 8 deals with coordination and planning and integration, and it really focuses on coordinating different planning processes. And so that's an ongoing item that many agencies are doing, and it's kind of incorporating the GSP into some of that work. And then ISA 9 deals with well registration and management. This item is an item that the GSA will need to consider if they want to move forward with some type of a registration program. This item was identified as a part of the adaptive management approach to addressing some of the projects. Oops, sorry. And demand management items in the rest of the GSP. It may be something where the West Turlock wishes to develop some type of a voluntary program for well registrations, along with the East Turlock GSA as they move forward with their implementations. And so this item is included as something that the West Turlock can talk about as we move forward. And last slide, promise. This one has to do with developing financing strategies. We've already talked a little bit about that. There is a SIGLE implementation grant that will be coming out with a solicitation package in September. And so we're planning on, I think, including wells as a part of that grant. I'd like to consider including more wells if possible, and there'll be more information coming out about that. It's going to be a competitive grant, and it'll be due in December, and so we'll have from September to December to put that grant application together. And so in the coming months, we'll be talking about what to include and that sort of thing. But there is funding in the budget to do a grant application. And lastly, there's funding in the budget to update the Opti system to include the GSP projects. And that's a joint project for both GSAs. So I hope that helps. I see there's an item in the chat. Oh, that sounds great, Karen. Oh, that's a direct message. Karen said that she would work with the Valley Water Coalition or Club. I don't know what the C stands for. Sorry, to help identify monitoring wells. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Debbie. So just as Debbie showed, that we have basically working on a 5-year plan with annual budgets, but kind of showing you that, as we've mentioned quite a few times, the GSP is not like the old plan some of us worked on, we put on the shelf and walk away. This is one where we have to do ongoing implementation. The implementation does cost money. So, which will lead us into our next item. But in the meantime, on number 4, do we have any questions for Debbie and the schedule and the actions that are being contemplated over the next 1 to 5 years?
Oh, sorry, and I unshared. I can share it again if somebody needs it.
Okay. Okay, hearing none and seeing none. Let's move on to the main event today. Budget update, informational update on the forecasted costs and budget for the Turlock Subbasin, and particularly the West Turlock GSA. So over to you, Mr. Clipper. I'm assuming you have some slides or no? There you go.
So I'm going to share with you guys what all that's going to cost for you. So I sent out this spreadsheet to everyone on the TAC. Let me know if you didn't get it or need it. Basically, we broke them down by the different projects. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then, oops, let me freeze panels here real quick. Anyway, sorry, I wasn't prepared. But then you come over here, and this is the cost for the individual agencies and everything. Anyone have any questions?
Hey, Michael, maybe just go over kind of, it's kind of there, but just show the kind of the increases that people are looking at in their budgets over in
Oh, okay.
kind of general terms.
Okay, let me, so,
There you
if I can kind of hide,
Michael, the freeze pane, I think, is in view.
okay, thank
We were
you.
looking for that earlier.
Yes. Okay, so let me try that. View. And okay. So then here's what everyone paid for last year, and then comparing that to what they would pay this year. You can see if you're a smaller agency, the effect is smaller because of the $10,000 dues are kind of drive the show there. But then as you get to larger agencies, it's about a 22% increase over last year's costs. And then as Debbie mentioned, we are spreading out the wells to a 3-year project. So we collected 50% last year, 25% we're going to collect this year, and then another 25% next year. And that's for construction and design.
Michael, I have a question.
Yes.
If no one else wants to ask it. Modesto had a reduction in there.
Yes. They prepaid on the wells.
There you
So
go.
they pay, yeah. They're kind of, I had to say kind of special, I call them, because they are a large entity, but they are a small portion of it. So they're able to do a few of those things, like Turlock, TIDs, the counties still have their large portions and they're a large entity. And then you have the smaller entities that are, but they kind of are a little bit lopsided, I would say.
Right.
So they've helped us out in the past, prepaying on items.
Okay.
So that's hence the gray ones here. And then if you look back, that would be the payments that they've made
There it
already.
is.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Michael, one thing that caught my eye in there is the 5-year update is something when we did the budgeting for East Turlock, kind of looking forward for their Prop 218, the board brought this up as it's a big deal versus the annual report, and it probably going to involve a pretty major update run on the groundwater model and other things, the 5-year report. And so it was such a big cost we saw coming that we ended up spreading it out over multiple years so that you didn't have this big ask that year from the agencies and the participants who were paying. And that just somebody just bring up is, do we want to think about doing that with the 5-year update where you're kind of spreading that cost out?
I'll let Debbie, did you want to talk on that, Debbie?
So I do think that it is spread out. It includes funding over probably about a 3-year time frame, where in year 3 and 4 there would be model updates and what have you, and then in year 5 it would be developing the report. So you don't see that here, but because you don't see the 5-year update in the first year, but you will see it in coming years.
So Debbie, we like spread over 3 years or something like that potentially. So what you're thinking about?
Yeah, that was the idea anyway. So it's not spread evenly over all 5 years because there's so much to be done in these first couple of years and setting up programs and what have you, that we pushed it back a little bit.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else have questions for Michael Clipper or Debbie? Okay, I know a lot of you, March, April, are putting your preliminary budgets together. You know, the agencies have a July 1st fiscal year. So hopefully this helps. And again, Michael Clipper is a great resource. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out to him. And of course, always Debbie is there as the plan manager if you have questions about why we're doing this and why we're doing it now and that type of thing. So I did get a phone call earlier in the day from from the agencies, just kind of wanted to get filled in. So and any of us are here as a resource for you as you start putting your budgets together. Okay, anything else on budget update?
So Michael, we were planning on bringing this to the joint TAC, I think, at the next meeting, and then the GSA in May. Yes?
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. So what we'd like to do with our budget is actually kind of adopt it or recommend it for approval by the TAC. So the TAC will vote on the budget, as Debbie says, in a few weeks, and then it'll go to the board in May for adoption by the West Turlock board. So that's kind of the process we're looking at right now. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Debbie and Michael. That concludes item number 5. So moving to item number 6, which is me. Let me get my stuff ready here. So this is the well construction permitting process. Now let me do a screen share here. Yeah, where's my screen share? There it is. Wow, these are so long. I forgot how to do it. Okay. Okay, here we go. Am I sharing screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so in the world of well permitting, a lot has changed over the last few months. Stanislaus County and Merced County have amended their ordinances relating to groundwater regulation, and also are going through their well permitting processes and changing that. And Stan County just updated theirs. And so now there is actually a role for the GSAs to play in the well permitting process. And as you can see here, this is from Stanislaus County. And so they refer new wells or replacement wells to us with some exceptions. And Christy, if we want technical details, wells to the GSA. And the point is to see if the proposed project or proposed well is compliant with the GSP that we adopted this year. So that's the wording from Stanislaus County. Governor Newsom just issued an executive order related to the drought. And as you can see in item 9 here towards the bottom, there's a role for the GSA, the Sustainability Agency managing the basin where the well is proposed, would have to make a finding that the proposed well would not be inconsistent with a management program established under the GSP. So again, that's the not inconsistent with our GSP. And the Merced County in their ordinance has a line that says the proposed use of the well is consistent with the GSP that covers the location for the well. So you have three, you have the state, you have Merced County, you have Stanislaus County, effectively all the same thing. They want the GSA to weigh in to show how this proposed well may or may not jive with the GSP. So go to the stuff I've been working with Valerie. You guys have already seen all this, so I just want to cover it for you. So we when I take this to the board next month. See that? Okay, so I have to thank Christy McKinnon here at Stanislaus County to kind of help us through the process early on. So we got, I think, 4 referrals for new wells in the West Turlock GSA in various locations, some way out west, some in the Houston area and one in the eastern side of our area. And so those wells referred to us. We had 30 days to respond. And my thought process was that it's better to respond within the 30-day time frame than wait to go through our approval process with you and the board, so we don't delay these applicants unnecessarily. So that was a decision I went for. And as you know, I did email the board. I got approval early on from the chair and the vice chair, and also followed with you and the board just to let them know what we were doing. We get these referral letters, kind of like through the CEQA process, very similar. And we make some just some comments that, you know, we're not a critically overdrafted subbasin. We submitted our plan, but the plan is under review. It hasn't been finalized by DWR yet. And then we kind of look at these two areas. Is it an area that's subject to extraction limits? And the answer is no, because we don't have extraction limits right now. Is it an area where there's exceedances of minimum threshold? So those are the two criteria we used to evaluate whether this project was consistent with the GSP. There's potentially a whole lot more, but it's get very consistent, very cumbersome. And remember, the main focus of all of these ordinances from the county and the state and the counties and the state is to make sure that extraction doesn't worsen sustainability. So that's the main focus. And so right now we're on our way, I think, because of this year. We will exceed some minimum thresholds. So we can discuss that later, but I think right now there's no locations that are of significant concern. So again, we note that we evaluated this, extraction limits, compliance with minimum thresholds, but we're not weighing in to say whether the county should or should not issue this permit. They have to refer to us. We have to make a determination whether it's consistent with our GSP or not inconsistent or compliant. But again, the county is the permitting agency, and they ultimately make the decision whether this well permit should be issued or not. And so based on the historic budget, we know the West Turlock GSA is in recharge to the subbasin, and we're working on to make sure through the implementation of our GSP that over that 20-year time frame, we will manage the basin sustainably. But we did add some disclosures, and we worked with Valerie on this a little bit, or significantly, that on a go-forward basis, things may change, and there may be extraction limits. And so the idea is that the permittee, the person getting this permit, doesn't think, well, now I have a well, I can pump as much as I want for as long as I want. Recognition this is a privilege, and things may change over time. And also that the GSA has a number of programs and projects we'll be doing over time, which will potentially affect this new well or replacement well. And so let me know about that. And then also one of the things that this is probably more of a TID issue, but obviously critical to the subbasin, that we want to make sure that growers who have access to surface water continue to use that surface water to the maximum extent. So a year like this year, they've been curtailed a little bit, but to use their maximum surface water allotment and then use pumped groundwater conjunctively. Concern potentially in our region is that growers, trade, which they can be now going to trade their surface water and pump more, which would kind of defeat the purpose of having a well for supplemental purpose. So we don't want this kind of as a way for people to substitute surface water for groundwater and end up hurting the aquifer. So it's just kind of a notice that if you have access to surface water, please use your maximum allotment and use the well for supplemental purposes. And again, a final encouragement for well owners to put some type of flow meter in, because I think over time we will be registering wells and trying to get a better handle on how much growers pump. So that's what's in the letter. My plan is to take this information to the board just to show them what we've done so far, why we did it, what the ordinance is, and the governor's executive order include. One last thing, just a kind of a thought on the bigger picture, right? And Valerie's welcome to weigh in here on kind of groundwater rights. So groundwater rights a little bit different to surface water rights. It's not first in time, first in right. So every landowner overlying the subbasin has the opportunity to pump. It's a correlative right. So they have the right to pump and do no harm. And if they get, it's like kind of everybody would get cut back in the same manner. So it's not the last person who gets cut back first, like it is with surface water, but the idea is you get your fair share based on circumstances. If circumstances change, everybody's fair share amount may change too. And so the thought is, if you have, I know I'm just throwing numbers, if you have 1,000 wells, one more well doesn't necessarily tip the subbasin over the edge between sustainability and non-sustainability. You could add that well, but then maybe every grower has to cut back their pumping 1% to get the subbasin back in balance. So it's a different approach than maybe surface water, where you say you're fully allocated and you can't take any more surface water. Groundwater is a little bit different. I think that's kind of the approach that we'll take on a go-forward basis. So, but we'll see. Again, other basins are much different situation. We're adding new land for irrigated farmland may be troublesome, but in our area, everything, at least in the West Turlock GSA, has already been converted to farmland or urban uses. So that's where we are with the well construction permitting process, and answering, at least right now, the referrals we've had from Stanislaus County. I know Merced County's new regulations haven't quite gone into effect yet. I did get an email and I forgot to dig it out. That basically said, with the governor's executive order, we will be referring new well permits to you sooner rather than later for you to make a finding along the lines of what the governor's executive order is all about. Okay, so with that, I will stop sharing and ask if you have any questions for me. My wife's a school teacher. I know how she feels now when the kids don't respond. Christy, anything from your end where you're here? And again, thank you for your help in helping us respond, and just any kind of insights you have will be welcome.
Thank you. I think that this has been a really smooth transition. I just wanted to say that since we received the governor's executive order, we did notice some substantial changes to our permitting process that aren't really going to interrupt the way that GSAs are handling these new reviews. But the big difference is that our replacement irrigation or greater than 2 acre-feet per year extractors that have been exempt from the ordinance prohibition, as long as they're in compliance with the GSPs, are still going to be exempt from the discretionary decisions, but we do have to start sending these to the GSAs in order to be in compliance. Previously, we didn't need to do that because of the exemption in the ordinance. And in addition, we do have to make sure that every time we issue a well permit, so if it's for a new well or a replacement well or a reconstruction, the county, in addition to finding the approval from the GSAs, has to determine that the proposed project isn't gonna create significant interference drawdown on neighboring wells or generate land subsidence issues that might damage critical infrastructure. So we are looking into some criteria to be established right now that we can use to make those determinations without delaying these projects, especially because many are replacement wells that are in need due to drought conditions. So I just wanted to say that we're hoping to have this criteria in effect within the next week or two. So that's a bigger change for us that we weren't anticipating.
Thanks for the update, Christy. With the drought as severe as it is, I think we're all going to be in a mode of reacting to what gets thrown at us. Mike, you had something? Mike,
Well, there are a couple things. One is this idea of well interference. And looking at that, that's different than an extraction limitation or that, at some point. And yes, engineering analysis can be done for well interference if you know the aquifer, the different parameters you need to use. That isn't necessarily, but are they kicking that to the GSA to do the well interference? Or is that
No,
something
no.
the
So
county is gonna do?
the county is seeking out information from consultants that are experienced with the local conditions, who can provide just some criteria that is acceptable per industry standards, that will let us know, based on these conditions, we can anticipate such amount of interference drawdown. And then based on the criteria adopted in our PEIR, we know what a significant effect is. We've already defined those conditions. So it is not going to be an additional review on the behalf of the GSA. Is that something that the county is going to have to do in addition to getting the verification from the GSAs that the project is consistent with the adopted GSPs?
I think we ought to put another caveat in the GSA's letter that states that the GSA is not reviewing well interference. I think there was another thing about whether you might be causing a problem for a nearby domestic well in the executive order. That I think is another thing that we'll just want to be careful what the GSA is saying with your letter, and who's doing what, to look at what these new requirements are.
That's a good point, Mike. I think right now we kind of attest to two things about minimum thresholds and extraction. These new requirements are really requirements for the permitting agency, not for the GSA. The GSA role is strictly conformity with the GSP. But again, we can always look at that to make sure the language is crystal clear. But it looks like Christy's got a good handle on it, what her role is in the process anyway. So that's good. Right, do we have any more questions? I just want to thank Faye and Jennifer and keep the paperwork moving on these referrals. So that's always good that we provide good customer service to the people who are applying for these, as well as Stan County who's processing them. So that's important. So thank you guys for your work there. Okay, anything more on item 6, well permitting process? Okay, if not, moving to item 7, Sigma related update. This is our normal technical advisory committee member updates. Looks like you're up first, Mr. Smart.
Well, don't mean to disappoint, but I don't have a ton to report. I think
That's okay.
the biggest thing would be, and we continue to send out newsletters / emails as deemed appropriate, timing wise. I think we sent one out earlier just announcing this meeting, and then the East Turlock Subbasin GSA has its meeting on Monday, and just sending out general information. I think the most important of which, at least for me, I probably should have known about it sooner, is that the Department of Water Resources has come out with California Groundwater Live. It's a website that is available that has information on groundwater levels, subsidence, and other types of things related to Sigma implementation. They rolled that out kind of in concert with their most recent update on Bulletin 118, and they continue to make changes. There's little things in there where stakeholders can narrow down into specific subbasins, and I know that a lot of that information is information that's provided to the department already. So I haven't necessarily looked at it, and I don't know if anyone on this call that's been involved in the TAC has looked at it to see if it's how applicable it is, or if there's any caveats that make things a little bit different or nuanced that maybe the state doesn't have its handle on. But that is still available for people to check out, and I've been going through it much of this week, browsing around, and it does have some really good information. So California Groundwater Live, it's on their Sigma portal. So I just wanted to note that for people on the call. I think that's it for me. Nothing else prepared. So unless there's any questions or any other things related to outreach.
Thank you, Herb. Any questions for Herb? There you go. Grants, Debbie?
I don't have a lot to report either. I did talk a little bit earlier about the upcoming grant opportunities, and so it's something that we're going to be wanting to begin talking about. And then we're continuing to move forward with the PEIR, which is the last project remaining for our existing grant. I'd be happy to answer any questions if people had questions about grants.
Apparently not. Thank you for that update. Again, in the fall, there will be an opportunity to apply for additional grants for implementation. We'll start working towards that too. All right, moving to item number 8, we're going to adjourn to closed session. Valerie, you want to introduce that item and then take us there? Just so you know, the closed sessions is a restricted list of entries, and Herb will be in charge of that. But Valerie, you want to introduce closed session?
Sure. Yep. It's just under Government Code 54956.9, exposure to potential litigation.
Wonderful. So Herb, what's the process for a closed session? You're just going to get a new room, or do you just remove people who don't need to be on?
Yeah, it's probably the easiest thing for me to do would be to put everybody in a room that's supposed to be in there. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to, this may take a quick second, but I'm going to put people in here who I know. Obviously, Valerie, we have you, and then I'm going to go with people who I've seen that are represented in TAC meetings. So that'd be Bill, and we want Christy in there as well, right, from the county.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis, Debbie, Faye from the county, Jennifer, Karen, Leandro, Michael Clipper, Miguel Alvarez, Michael Pitcock's in there too from Waterford, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then Orlando is with Turlock, City of Turlock. And I have a Jamie, or is it Jaime? As well.
Yeah, no, Jaime, City of Houston, right?
City of Houston.
That is correct.
Perfect. I have listed you. And then there is one number I don't recognize. It's a area code 209-605 number.
So Herb, I got the 209-605-2606.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. I'll have you. I have to put that in there as well, Miguel. Otherwise, we'll just see you and you won't be able to talk. So that's no good.
All right. Thanks.
All right. It looks like I have everybody listed in there. I'm going to now click open all rooms, and you should have an indication to join that room. And then we'll come back into the main session, and we will report out anything that's reportable if needed. And so we'll be back shortly then for those who remain in the main session.
Okay, so we've exited our closed session and we don't have anything to report. We'll be having our next regular meeting of the West Turlock Subbasin and the East Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee. That's scheduled for Thursday, April 28th, 2022 at 2 o'clock. And then we have another special meeting for the West Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee that's scheduled for Thursday, May 12th at 2 o'clock. And that is all we have unless anybody has anything to add. If not, I will need a motion for adjournment.
I will
City
move.
Modesto, Miguel. Second.
Thank you, Miguel.
And I motion Maldonado.
Thank you very much. So that ends our meeting at, let's see, I don't see my clock, 3:21.